I want to shift your relationship to history because you read it, it's just about dates and figures and events. Yeah, it's interesting, but that's not what history is. History is something that was alive. One person asked the question, one of my readers out there, what is the importance of studying history? What is the value of studying history? And it's curious that you would ask that now because I just wrote a chapter which I titled Journey Beyond the Limits of Linear Time, and I call it the historical sublime. You know, there are a couple ways of approaching history that I think are very important, and one of them is to learn about our past, to learn about the trends in history, the cycles in history, so that you understand how we arrived at this present moment. If you start digging into the details and you understand the tremendous changes going on in the 18th century, it starts to explain a little bit about the modern world. A book I highly recommend to people, a kind of a sociological history, is a book called The Fall of Public Man. And it describes the origins of our modern consciousness in the 18th century. And then, of course, then comes the Industrial Revolution. If you put all these pieces together, suddenly 2024 and our decade and our times will start to make a little bit more sense. And so a lot of people now walk around, this is what I wrote about in my chapter, they have no idea about history. They're ahistorical, what we would call ahistorical, okay? And they think that everything around them is so new and exciting and this has never happened before and this is just the world around them. You're living in a dream if you think that. You're living in an illusion. You don't realize that everything that we are now, every little atom in our bodies, every cell, every thought that we have comes from history, comes from people in the past, comes from things that were built in the past. If you like living in your dream and your illusion, reacting to everything and thinking everything is so important and significant without any sense of proportion, go ahead, be my guest. But history gives you a sense of proportion. But in the chapter I just wrote, I want to shift your relationship to history because a lot of us, you read it, it's just about dates and figures and events. Academics who write about history and all these dead people and dead things and et cetera, et cetera. Yeah, it's interesting, but that's not what history is. History is something that was alive. So in 100 years, you are going to be history, right? And people might read about you in particular, but they're not going to understand you because they're going to transform you into something dead and frozen. They don't know what it was like for you to be alive in that moment, your thoughts, your dreams, your desires, your energy, etc. History is full of people who were once alive like you are now. My chapter is about how you can enter those worlds, how you can enter their spirits, how you can enter their subjectivity and get a feel for what it was like to be alive in the past. And I give example after example after example of how you could go through that process in history. It's not the same as the other aspect where you learn about the present, although it does teach you. But it is an utterly sublime experience because you don't realize how strange the human animal is. I say that there's nothing weirder than Homo sapiens on this planet. There's some very strange animals out there, bony fishes, dinosaur bones, flying squirrels, whatever. Nothing is as strange as the Homo sapien. And if you read about ancient Babylon like I wrote about, or you read about Paleolithic ancestors, about hunter-gatherers, or if you read about the medieval period, which I've been writing about, or even the 18th century and people's behavior, it's like, whoa, how strange, how exciting, how interesting. People had different ideas about life, different realities, different perspectives. It opens your mind to different ways of thinking. When you have no relationship to history, you live in this culture, this social media culture, where there's kind of a single way of looking at the world that we've all been inculcated with. We've all been programmed with our algorithms, right? It's a monoculture. When you study the Aztecs and you study the ancient world and you study ancient China and you study the Renaissance, you see this version of reality, this perspective, this one. It opens your mind. It's a brilliant journey, and that's what I wrote about in my last chapter. So you can go ahead and ignore history, and I understand why, because it can be boring to some people, but I think it's the most exciting thing we have because it's who we are, in fact.